Hello chess friends and welcome to Azarov Chess channel and welcome to the round 49 of the TCEC season 14 Superfinal between the top engines Leela C0 and Stockfish. So we had 19 consecutive draws, and today Leela managed to win a game, and now Leela takes the lead in their match game. And I'm really excited to watch the continuation of this match, because now Stockfish has to catch up with Leela. And today we had a really nice game in the Nimzo Indian defense. This counter Nimzo set up by White, and the game after then transposed into this Benoni. And I rarely see that Benoni is now played in this top grandmaster level, because I used to play the Benoni against d4 myself, but you'll see there are these problems about this d6, about this d6 pawn, and Leela simply play onto this weakness very aggressively, and I think she sent it also a very strong opening to history. So let's see now the game. Here we have d4 by Leela and knight on f6 by Stockfish, c4 and e6, knight on f3, and this is I think the best way to fight with the Nimzo Indian defense. This is this anti-Nimzo setup which prevents. I've explained it in a couple of my videos. After bishop on b4, you can play the knight on d2, although it's not a good coordination with your knights, with the knight on d2 and f3. At least you don't have to put your knight here on c3, and you don't have the threat that black is gonna double up your pawns here on the c file. So here Stockfish played c5, and now it's basically a Benoni, because after d5 we transposed into the Benoni defense, and I would really love to see this Blumenfeld counter gambit by black. I would love to see an engine game in this variation, because maybe after d takes e6 you have f takes e6, and now okay, c takes b5. And now bishop on b7. This is the common setup in the Blumenfeld counter gambit, and I really love this variation to play as black. Let's flip the board a little bit. You see, although we are a pawn down, but we have a very nice central control with d5. After that, maybe knight on d7, prepare maybe moves as e5. You see, although white has this advantage on the queen side with this 3-on-1 situation, it's really hard for white to create the pass pawn situation here, and the pass pawn situation is, of course, speaking in long terms. So far we can as black simply play onto this central control with the pawns, which is, I think, a very important strategical element in a chess game. So I would really love to, as I said, to see these two top engines play this Blumenfeld counter gambit. I simply love the variation, and I think it's really playable for both sides. E takes d5 was played by Stockfish, c takes d5, and now d6, knight on c3, and here g6. When I prepared against the Benoni, I used to play this line with e4, bishop on g7, bishop on e2, castling, and bishop on f4, and that was always my mistake, because basically I always had these problems with this e4 pawn. Okay, I managed to win some games, but in better level I really lost some games in this setup, and I also tried to find better opening lines against the Benoni. Here Leela plays this very strong variation with first move bishop on f4. After bishop on g7, you have here the queen on a4 idea, and this is I think a very good move, because after bishop on d7, you see this bishop, although it attacked the queen, but after queen on b3, you see this knight is really blocked out by the bishop. It cannot jump on this very important d7 square. Meanwhile, black has again this weak d6 pawn, so black is forced to do something and somehow protect this pawn. So here queen on c7 played by Stockfish. Okay, so far so good. basically black is not lacking in development here, but you see if you try somehow maybe to develop the knight here on through the square a6 and then fix it on b4, it can always be kicked away with the move a3. And if you try this pawn breakthrough here with the move c4, well, then you're leaving this e4 square for the knight. The knight can jump then on e4, and if you try maybe queenside attack with b5, this could also leave after knight on d4 a weak c6 square. So as you see, with this queen on b3 and this knight on c3, bishop on f4 setup, white really slowed down the development by black, and I really love this setup. For those who had troubles maybe to play against the Benoni, I think it's a perfect variation here played by Leela. e4, now finally e4, because after castling now we have knight on d2, and you see in this variation that I showed you, I played already always this move bishop on e2, which is not necessary to play it so far. Meanwhile, with this knight on d2, we have really fixed this e4, which supports of course our space advantage on d5. And now Stockfish tried knight on h5. Okay, bishop on e3, here f5 was played. Now e takes f5, bishop takes on f5, and now you can play maybe bishop on e2, try to attack the knight, because then if we of course take the knight, then black will have a weakened pawn structure around his kings. He will have both of his pawns on the h file. But here Leela finds of course the best continuation with h3, which is already a threat to play the move g4. So you see again the bishop is forced to retreat on this very annoying square. It's not so good for this bishop, although it has good diagonals here, but it again blocks out the knight's mobility. And if bishop on c8 would have been played, then of course after knight on d7, again the same idea, then the bishop would be blocked out by the knight. So you see with this queen on a4 preparation by Leela, this early check really slowed down black's development, and you'll see that black will have troubles to in order to regroup his pieces here. So here after bishop on d7, here knight on e4 was played. So you see Leela is not castling so far, but that's possible because we have a very good central control with our pieces. You don't have always to have good central controls only with your pawns. You can also have good central control with your pieces, and Aaron Nimzovich was one of the top masters from the last century, which proved in which he proved that you can also gain a very good central control with your pieces. And he's of course very well known for his Nimzo Indian defense, which was played here by Stockfish. And okay, now you see black has to decide how to continue and how to develop here the pieces. Here king on h8 was played, because there was already this threat here. If you try maybe something like knight on f4, maybe to fix the knight here on a very active square, then you get knight on c5. If you try d takes c5, then you get d6 with the check and the attack on the queen. Then maybe bishop on e6 can be played, but we can simply take out the queen here on c7, bishop on b3, then you can simply take out the knight. After rook takes on b8, we have a takes b3, and of course white has a completely winning endgame here, because we are simply one piece up, and that's not what Stockfish wanted here, of course. So here a6 was played by Stockfish, and now a4. Again, we are simply slowing down the potential queenside breakthrough with the move b5, and we can also slow it even more down with the move a5. So far, perfect restriction. I hope you realize this crowded situation by these pieces. It's really not good. White has really a better coordination with the pieces. Basically what we have to do is here to castle, and then we have completed our development totally, and black will need many moves in order to do the same thing. So bishop on f5 was played. Now knight on g5, and now we are aiming on this square e6, because let's see in this previous move where are the weak squares, or maybe the weak pawns here by black. Okay, the d6 is a weak pawn, and but it's hard to attack for white to attack maybe this pawn with some other pieces, because the bishop cannot move here to f4. Okay, maybe this b6 is also weak, but if we try maybe something like a5, knight on a4, you see this pawn would then be hanging, and it can also be prevented with moves as knight on d7 in order to protect this very weak b6 square. So far in this position we have only the potential e6 square, which is really a weakness. We want to bring the knight there, and this two knights are really now very well coordinated, because if you take it out, then we can take with this other knight, and if you try something like h6 here to prevent a potential knight on g5, well, then maybe white can play here queen on c2, and this was really a discovered attack on this very weak g6 pawn. So you see, in order to protect this weakness, black will create another weakness. So I wouldn't like here as black this position with these two pawns on the 6th rank in front of the king. So this is not something that black will do, of course. So that's why bishop on f5, we have knight on g5, and here I think it was the first maybe slightly mistake here by black, because you see, after castling knight on d7 and now knight on e6, okay, we have bishop takes on e6, d takes e6, and now knight on e5. Okay, now we created sort of a blockade against this mobile pawn on the 6th rank. But when you create a blockade, you don't want to put your queen in front of the pawn. Maybe we would love to have maybe our knight here on this square. Then it would be a very nice blockade with the knight. And if you only use your queen as a defensive piece to block out a potential e7 move, that's not good, of course. And I think this was the first mistake here by Stockfish that was played, because let's go back a little bit. Here, instead of queen on e7, maybe bishop on d4 could have been played, because you see white hasn't castled so far. And if you try maybe something as bishop takes on d4, then you have c takes d4, and now the knight has to move somewhere. We have at least gained the tempo. Knight on e2, and here knight on d7 can be played, if white of course will castle, because he wants bring out his king here from this very important e file. If black brings here the rook on the e file, this could be a dangerous attack for white's king. So in the continuation here, you see black could have then fixed the position here around this e5 square, although maybe after rook on c1 and now queen on e7 attacking the knight, if white plays now knight on e6, then you have simply, you see, this very annoying move d3. So this will be a more complicated position. I think in this position Stockfish is maybe even a little better than in this positional ones. So I think this would be a better continuation for black. So here, after queen on e7 castling and knight on e6, we have bishop takes on e6, and now d takes on e6, and as you can see, the queen is now really only a defensive piece here, and that's not good, of course. Knight on e5, we have bishop on d5, and now you see, when we are playing as white against this Benoni, I had also my troubles always with this light square bishop. It was always blocked out sort of by this pawn light square pawns. And okay, now we have the same position, but you see, when we have this very nice space advantage on the 6th rank, you see we are trying simply to play around this pawn. So our main strategical ideas are here to occupy maybe the d7 or this f7 square. So let's see now how Leela does it. Although these ideas don't always end that you put something on f7 or maybe on d7, but as an idea, it's always nice to know where you should coordinate your attack. Here knight on c6 was played, and now rook on e1. So if you try here knight on d4, then of course we can simply take out this pawn on b7, so that's not good. Here after rook from a to e1, rook on b8 was played. First the protection of this b7 pawn, and now knight on e4. Knight on f6 was played, and now bishop on g5 with this pinning idea. Now knight on b4, and now knight on c3. Now h6. Black is trying to kick away the bishop, but now Leela plays the correct move here. Bishop takes on f6 after rook takes on f6. Now we have again created this g6 weakness. Again we are trying the same idea. We want to occupy this d7 and f7 squares, but you see now this g6 could be an object of the attack of the white bishop, and if you try maybe the move g5 in order to get away with the pawn, then of course after potential bishop on e4 we would then have a very strong diagonal against black's king on the light squares, and this would be deadly for black. So g3 here was played, also an important move because we want to have a better mobility here with the bishop. Now the bishop can maybe go here to g2, and after h4 it can also go to h3 and then support this pawn from another diagonal, from an even better diagonal. So here rook on e8 was played by Stockfish, and now h4. Rook on f5, bishop on g2. Now we have bishop on d4, and okay, now black brought out also the bishop here. It could be also a very nice attacking piece, but these ideas to play on this f2 can always be met with rook on e2. You see black has still the troubles to fight with this e6 pawn. So here knight on e2 was played, and now a5. Bishop on h3. Now we have rook on d5, knight takes on d4, c takes d4, and now queen on c4. Let's now stop a little bit. The position is really complicated here, but speaking in long terms, you see black has this double pawn situation, and it's basically one pawn. It's basically one pass pawn, and white is also one pass pawn. But here we have this 3-on-2 situation on the king side. So in a potential endgame, this would be a completely winning endgame for white, because we could create then another pass pawn on the king side, and here on the queen side we have the 2-on-2 situation. So if we trade off all of the pieces, this will be a completely winning endgame for white. So knight on c6 was played, queen on d3. We have queen on g7, and now knight on knight on d8 is not so good, because we can take out this pawn on g6. So you see the g6 weakness is still present in the game. Queen on g7 had to be played, and here rook on e4. We have rook on c5, now king on g2, an improvement also of the king. So in a potential endgame again, we would have a more centralized king. We could then play the king on f3, then on e4, and the king would be on the best square in a potential endgame. So rook on e7, we have rook on e1, queen on f8, and now rook on g4, again attacking this very weak pawn on g7. So here rook on e5 was played, and now rook on f4. If you try here rook on e5, then black can take with this knight on e5. Okay, you can take the pawn on d4, but this knight would be then a very nice centralized piece, and it's really hard to attack this knight from this square. Basically it's unattackable because we have the like square bishop, and of course we cannot attack the knight. We have only our troubles with this d6 pawn, so this is not something that Stockfish of course wanted. Here after rook on f4 we have queen on e8, and now rook on c1, rook on g7, and now queen on b3. And now the position is really critical because there's no way anymore for Stockfish to attack the pawn on e6. If he attacks the e6 with knight on d8, then he will lose this d4 pawn, and again we would then have an endgame in which we have pawns on both sides, and you know that when we have an endgame on both sides with the pawns on both sides, that bishop is better there. And one of the top grandmasters that played the best endgames, I think, was the top grandmaster Robert James Fisher. If you were left him with this bishop against knight situation, he was always crushing you, and he played this perfect restrictions against the opponent's knights. And here if you try to take out this e6, which is really annoying, it's really many moves on this very annoying e6 square, you will lose this d4. This d6 again would be an object of white's attack. So here again queen on e7 was played, again trying to play the blockade against this pawn, but again the queen is only a defensive piece here, which is again a problem. So here bishop on g4 was played, now h5, and now bishop on f3. This bishop is still good because now we can simply attack here on c6, and then after that with the rook, then we would then have a distant pass pawn situation. We would then have a 2-on-1 on the queen side. So here knight on d8 finally was played. Now rook on c8 with the pinning here, and king on h7. Rook on d4, knight takes on e6, and now rook on d5, now knight on c5. And now an important move, queen on d1. You see, we have also some tactical ideas, because you see black really weakened the castled king here with the moves g6, h5. He played an early fianchetto, of course, in the Benoni defense. He played also, if you have noticed, this f5 move after bishop takes on f5. So he already gave up one pawn in front of his king. So it can sometimes be really a problem when you weaken your king side too much. And now with the g6 h5 setup, you will see the problems about these pawns and how deadly now this bishop on f3 will be. So rook takes on d5, queen takes on d5, and you see now the threats. We have a threat, bishop takes on h5, then of course queen takes on h5, and it would lead to checkmate. So here queen on f6 was played, but bishop on h5 is good anyway, because after g takes h5 you have queen takes h5, and if you try to play queen on h6, then you get a rook on h8, deflecting the king from the defense of the queen. So this is of course completely winning for white. So here after queen on f7 and bishop on h5, a trade of queens was played here on f7, and now bishop on d1, knight on d3, and now f4. Now we have this very important pawn structure. It's a 3-on-1 situation on the king side. Again, in this potential endgame, we have again this pawns on both sides, and of course this bishop should be better in such endgame. So knight takes on b2, we have bishop on c2, and you see now the problems. Here is the threat, of course, to play the move h5. This knight is really out of game because it cannot jump here on d1, d3, of course f5, c4 is not possible. Of course, taking on a4 is also not possible, so a perfect restriction against this black's knight, which is now really out of game. So king on g7, now we have king on f3, and you see now, because of this very important move, king on g2, Leela managed to centralize the king here on f3, d5, and now rook on c5. Rook on d7, we have g4, and of course one rule in an endgame: you should push your pawns where you have the advantage, and this is a perfect move here by Leela. So d4, and now rook on b5, attacking the knight, and here knight on c4 was played, and this is now again a mistake by Stockfish. Maybe the better continuation would have been maybe to push the pawn on d3. After rook takes on b2, we have d takes c2, and now rook takes on c2. But now maybe you can get a draw here. It's still 1 plus something for Leela, and of course I think Leela would win the game, but at least Stockfish could have fight here against these 3 pawns, because after king on e4 you can play maybe rook on h3, and then after the rook on h7, I don't know, maybe we can create here a pass pawn situation, maybe try rook on a3 and then take out the a4 pawn, but still I think it's simply winning for white, although I think it's a better continuation than this knight on c4 idea, because now Leela simply attacked the knight on c4, we have rook on c7, now h5, g takes h5, and now rook takes on h5, and now we created this 2 connected pass pawns on the king side, and this is of course completely winning. Rook on c6 was played, now rook on h7, attack check on the king, and now Leela takes another pawn here on b7, knight on d6, rook on a7, rook on c3, king on e2, rook on a3, rook takes on a5. Now a couple of checks were played, and here after rook on a3, rook on d5 was played, knight on b7, and now Stockfish took another pawn, and here is the move 71. 5 more moves were played, but in the end Stockfish resigned, because these 3 pawns are simply too much to handle for black. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed this game, because these games are really helping me out in order to bet, in order to find good lines to play, because I basically play d4 myself, and I really love these opening lines that they are choosing, and I think of course I am gonna apply them also in my games. Okay, meanwhile you can watch my other chess games played by computers, and you can also watch my best chess games of all times if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. And you can also subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.